In the 1970s, America confronted a turbulent economic era, skyrocketing food prices and severe, unrelenting energy crises. Against this backdrop, as mothers began entering the workforce in droves, they faced a brutal pressure: how to pack maximum calories into a large family of 4 to 6 mouths within exactly 30 minutes flat at the stove. The answer lay in a single solitary savior: a 1-pound package of ground beef. Ground beef during this era was never merely a cheap ingredient, it was the ultimate foundation of the American family's culinary architecture. Armed with sharp kitchen intuition and handwritten recipe cards, homemakers transformed a block of raw protein into hundreds of magnificent, improvised dinners, stretching the dollar into sheer abundance and the warmth of a true home. Today, we will unlock the pantry doors of the 1970s to discover 20 legendary ground beef dishes that grace the dinner tables of millions of families every single week. Hit that subscribe button. Nostalgia Cookery will walk alongside you to awaken these monumental, nostalgic flavors. 1. Hamburger Hash. Opening this one-pan survival list is the Hamburger Hash, a vintage classic that ruled those brutal weekend nights right before payday. This was the ultimate rescue recipe when the pantry ran bare, forcing homemakers to weaponize their resourcefulness using nothing but a sack of old potatoes. They browned the ground beef to render its raw fat, then tossed in raw potatoes and onions, using a metal spatula to press the entire mixture flat against the bottom of the cast iron skillet. The structural secret of the dish lay in the bottom crust. The potato layers, fully saturated in beef tallow, met the intense heat of the cast iron to crystallize into a crisp, mechanical shield that shattered pleasantly, sheltering a core of potatoes that remained soft, fluffy, and rich within. Seasoned with a heavy dust of signature Lawry's seasoned salt, the bite of that crisp exterior crashing into the savory beef delivered absolute belly-filling satisfaction to the children's stomachs. Honest, unembellished, yet the cast iron skillet was always scraped bone dry long before anyone could even think to ask what else was for dinner. 2. Beef Macaroni Tomato Skillet. The beef macaroni tomato skillet was a flawless one-pan epic, born from the new industrial rhythm of suburban mothers, where the pressure of time demanded a hot, hearty meal while absolutely refusing the burden of washing a dozen dishes after a long work shift. They tossed raw macaroni noodles straight into the meat-infused tomato sauce and covered it to slow simmer for 15 minutes. The starch released from the pasta self-emulsified with the tomato broth, transforming the liquid into a thick, velvety, reddish-orange solution that clung tightly to every tube of macaroni. A heavy rain of cheddar cheese over the top met the trap steam, melting into a gooey, glistening blanket that anchored the juices of the ground beef within. A single skillet, a 1-pound package of beef, executed in under 25 minutes flat at the stove. The culinary collision of savory and sweet, vibrant acidity and the rich fat of saturated dairy transformed this dish into a loyal companion for every child of the 1970s. 3. Spanish rice with ground beef. Continuing our documentary archive is Spanish rice with ground beef, a dish marking the dawn of the American homemaker's exploration into the flavors of the wild Southwest, a clever engineering solution that transformed raw starch into a fashionable, exotic experience. The secret lay in the process of toasting raw rice directly within the rendered beef fat, ensuring every starch grain was fully armored in a layer of savory oil before being flooded with a tomato sauce heavily infused with cumin and chili powder. A sealed 20-minute braise forced the rice grains to absorb the entire payload of spicy broth, swelling into a tender, supple texture while resolutely refusing to clump into a mushy paste. Budget-friendly for the wallet while breathing a breath of novelty into the family's palate, a single skillet brought the unbridled spirit of the Texas frontier straight to the center of the suburban living room. 4. Texas Hash. Texas Hash possessed an operational structure entirely distinct from open-air skillet dishes. It shattered the requirement of constant kitchen monitoring through a mathematical equation of sealed, high-pressure baking inside the chamber of a ceramic casserole dish. They tossed raw rice, ground beef, and canned tomatoes together, armored the vessel with a double layer of aluminum foil, and banished it into the oven for 45 continuous minutes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. The compressed steam pressure forced the raw starch grains to drink in every drop of savory juice rendered from the tomatoes and beef fat to self-braise into a tender, supple texture. The mother latched the oven door shut, earning the total peace of mind to calmly step away into the living room to tidy the house or converse with her children. A single tray recipe that absolutely refused any stirring or monitoring. This was the most invaluable feature that a busy working mother of the 1970s desperately sought for her family kitchen. 5. Hamburger corn casserole. Launching the baking empire is the hamburger corn casserole, a treasured comfort food carrying the ultimate signature rich profile of the Midwestern American suburbs, operating on a clever synergy between two factory-processed corn textures. They locked egg noodles and ground beef into a dense matrix of condensed cream of mushroom soup, whole kernel corn, and cream-style corn, top-dressing the crown with crushed butter-slathered Ritz crackers before baking it for 30 minutes. The cream of mushroom soup functioned as an emulsifying dairy solvent that kept the beef strands moist and tender. The whole kernels delivered a snap-pop structural resistance. The creamed corn released a viscous sugar that bound tightly to the noodle fibers, while the baked cracker shield provided an absolute, shattering textural contrast. Every single scoop broke through that crispy armor to strike a sweet, milky core saturated with buttery richness. This was invariably the first ceramic dish scraped completely bone dry at every church basement potluck. 6. Sour cream noodle bake. The sour cream noodle bake arrived on suburban dinner tables like a magnificent illusion of an aristocratic Italian-American lasagna. Yet its mechanical process was streamlined into a high-speed, 30-minute assembly line. They layered egg noodles tossed in sour cream and cottage cheese alternately, with a savory meat sauce of ground beef and crushed tomatoes, topped it with a heavy rain of shredded cheddar, and banished it to the oven. Under the 350 degrees Fahrenheit heat, the dairy fats from the cottage cheese created a soft, viscous matrix that bound tightly to the egg noodle strands, completely mellowing the vibrant acidity of the tomatoes to engineer a buttery, velvety cream structure slick with beef tallow. Delicious, packed with strategic caloric energy, and perfectly engineered for reheating the next day while resolutely refusing to dry out, this dish transformed an ordinary Tuesday night into a space of abundant celebration. 7. Hamburger noodle bake with cottage cheese. The hamburger noodle bake with cottage cheese stood as an anchor recipe, appearing with the highest density inside hand-bound church community cookbooks as a testament to the heritage of working-class thrift. The dish weaponized low-cost cottage cheese as a binding solvent for the starch network. The oven's intense dry heat baked the exposed egg noodle strands along the rim of the dish into a charred, shattering mechanical shield, while the deep, steaming core sheltered the ground beef strands infused with scallions in a rich, supple, and mineral-savory density. Dirt cheap and rugged, yet possessing the sheer capacity to sustain heavy crowds for hours on end, this dish insulated the stomachs of middle-class workers as they navigated the years of food budget belt-tightening. 8. Cabbage roll casserole. The traditional cabbage rolls of the Eastern European immigrant community demanded a meticulous process of coring veins and rolling leaves that consumed hours on end. Cabbage roll casserole emerged as a deconstructed solution, breaking down that tedious ritual into a high-speed, single-dish assembly. They chopped the cabbage, tossed it with leftover cold rice, ground beef, and crushed tomatoes, balancing the profile with apple cider vinegar and brown sugar before armoring the dish with aluminum foil to bake for an hour. The sealed braising heat unraveled the fibrous structure of the vegetable, transforming the wilted cabbage shreds into sweet, succulent ribbons that self-stewed the tender ground beef from deep within. delivering the exact savory, sweet, and tangy flavor notes of the original blueprint. A massive, nutrient-dense party platter executed with a mere fraction of the labor. The dish generated a comforting warmth inside the chest, and its structural flavor profiles fused into an even richer, more velvety density the next day. 9. Wigwam Casserole. Wigwam casserole stood as a magnificent marriage between two of rural America's most beloved comforts: a savory, mineral-rich ground beef chili and a freshly baked pan of golden cornbread compressed into a single ceramic dish. They flooded a cornmeal and egg yolk batter directly over a dense foundation of ground beef and kidney bean chili before banishing it to the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. The intense, high-heat environment forced the cornmeal layer to set and harden into a crisp, mechanical cornbread shield, completely sealing the vessel to prevent the evaporation of savory juices from the meat below, engineering a structure that was flaky crisp on the outside, yet molten and succulent at the core. The physical act of breaking through that golden corn crust to strike the bubbling lava of savory, sweet, and spicy chili was an intensely satisfying culinary event, sustaining 6 mouths for a mere few cents of canned goods. 10. Beef and Biscuit Casserole. Sitting at number 10 is the Beef and Biscuit Casserole, a geometric architectural masterpiece of suburban comfort food. A high-speed assembly that transformed a tube of pre-made Pillsbury biscuits into a magazine cover centerpiece. They arranged the raw rounds of Pillsbury biscuit dough over a thick foundation of cheddar-infused ground beef sauce before baking it for 20 minutes. The stewing environment forced the underside of the biscuits to drink in the savory rendered fats from the meat, swelling into a soft, velvety matrix, while the exposed crowns met the heat to dry bake into a flaky, golden brown crust. A deeply savory and sweet beef filling at the deep foundation, sticky cheddar cheese in the middle, and flaky golden biscuits forming a crowning crown at the top. Executed flawlessly within exactly 30 minutes flat at the stove, it comforted the children's stomachs through many winter nights. 11. Hamburger Rice Hotdish. The Hamburger Rice Hotdish stood as the ultimate starch sanctuary, representing the very core of Minnesota farmhouse culinary identity, a mechanical invention that transformed leftover rice and canned goods into a synchronized matrix of dairy and protein. They combined ground beef with cold leftover rice and 2 cans of condensed Campbell's soup, strictly undiluted and absolutely refusing any added water, before top-dressing the crown with crunchy chow mein noodles to bake for 40 minutes. The baking heat forced the starch grains to drink in every drop of saturated fat from the thick soup, swelling into a soft, velvety density that bound tightly to the beef strands, while a splash of soy sauce released a deep, mineral savory undertone that crushed the cloying, rich dairy profile. The baked chow mein noodles engineered a shattering mechanical shield that crunched pleasantly over the viscous, cream-soaked rice foundation below, an honest recipe that sustained an entire generation of the frozen North through countless harvest seasons. 12. Tater Tot Hotdish. Representing the uncrowned king of the upper Midwest is the Tater Tot Hotdish, the ultimate, most sacred icon reigning over every church, potluck, wedding, funeral, and winter family gathering. This dish possessed a sealed, multi-layered geometric architecture engineered to absolutely refuse any loss of moisture. They shingled the entire surface with a dense grid of frozen tater tots, allowing the dry oven heat to bake the crowns into a shattering mechanical armor rich with buttery fat, while the middle layer of cream of mushroom soup insulated and blanketed the ground beef strands, resolutely refusing any dry textures. The physical sound of a metal fork cracking through that shatteringly crisp potato shield to strike the viscous, velvety meat core below was the dinner bell seared deep into the subconscious of a resilient generation. It invariably marched into every single farmhouse community event and was always scraped bone dry before the gathering ended. A masterpiece of pure efficiency that transformed supermarket frozen goods into a physical sanctuary sheltering mankind from the bitter blizzards. 13. Beef and bean burritos. Launching the frontier wave is the beef and bean burritos, a rolled sandwich representing a revolution in pure efficiency, solving the mathematical problem of stretching a single, solitary pound of ground beef into a massive platter of 8 bursting burritos. The structural secret lay in folding dense, savory refried beans directly into the ground beef to create a sticky, cohesive matrix that instantly doubled the volume of the filling, rolling it tight within flour tortillas before drenching it in a pungent, spicy enchilada sauce and cheddar cheese. The oven's intense heat dry-baked the exposed edges of the tortillas into a crisp, rigid shield, while the layers anchored at the bottom drank in the spicy gravy to swell into a soft, velvety texture that bound tightly to the gooey, molten cheese. A heavy platter packed with savory, sweet, and fiery flavor notes, carrying the spirit of the Southwest, filtered through the lens of a suburban kitchen, causing the entire family to inhale every bite while resolutely refusing a single word of complaint. 14. Frito Pie. Frito Pie, also known as the Midwestern walking taco, was an act of pure culinary rebellion. Shattering every conventional rule of the traditional family dining room, a legend bolted permanently into the childhood memories of the 1970s. A recipe that demolished the entire equation of washing dishes, absolutely refusing ceramic plates, absolutely refusing iron forks. They flooded scorching hot beef chili directly into the belly of a slit-open bag of Fritos corn chips, top dressing it with shredded cheddar and sour cream. The intense heat of the chili forced the cheese to automatically melt and self-emulsify into a rich dairy blend, causing the corn chips trapped at the bottom of the bag to soften into a viscous, savory starch matrix, while preserving the chips along the top edges to remain shatteringly crisp. The physical act of plunged a spoon to scoop up those corn chips, fully saturated in sweet and fiery chili gravy directly from the foil snack bag, gave the children the exhilarating feeling of completing a rebellious flavor heist, the eternal emotional anchor of a generation. 15. Chili dogs. Chili dogs were the ultimate treasured comfort food, carrying the electric atmosphere of local stadiums, winter night fairs, and family backyard barbecues scattered along the endless highway stretches. They browned the ground beef into a fine, mechanically smooth consistency to engineer a thick, viscous chili sauce, flooding it over the crown of a frankfurter nestled inside an ultra-soft bun, topped with raw onions and cheddar. The structural secret lay in the cling of that thick chili gravy. It absolutely refused to run or liquefy, tightly hugging the sausage cylinder and deeply saturating the bland starch fibers of the bun to soften them. Sticky fingers and napkins were strictly mandatory. This messy, sticky behavior was the ultimate feature of the dish, rather than a mechanical flaw of this low-cost platter. Every child sitting around the dinner table intuitively understood that rugged, unembellished deliciousness. 16. Tamale pie. Appearing in American cookbooks as early as 1900, the tamale pie stood as a monumental frontier bridge. Borrowing the exact spice profile of the traditional Mexican tamale while completely liberating mothers from the tedious ritual of wrapping corn husks. They packed a foundation of ground beef and chili powder-infused beans at the bottom of the dish, top dressing the surface with a layer of coarse cornmeal mush before baking it for 30 minutes. The dry oven heat forced the cornmeal mass to set into a crisp, mechanical shield with a slightly granular, nutty texture, permanently sealing the vessel to insulate the sweet flowing, fiery beef chili gravy below, absolutely refusing any dry or scorched textures. Massive, bold, and belly-filling, this dish was engineered for people who still had an entire shift of heavy manual labor ahead of them once the ceramic plates were scraped clean. 17. Hamburger steak with onion and brown sauce. Hamburger steak with onion and brown sauce was a dish charged with a specific mission: to simulate the grand form of a luxury restaurant steak, bringing the atmosphere of an aristocratic steakhouse straight to a tight Thursday night budget. They shaped the ground beef into thick, oval patties, searing the edges over high heat to achieve a deep Maillard crust, effectively sealing the protein envelope before flooding the pan with a viscous, robust brown onion gravy built from the charred fond clinging to the bottom of the cast iron. A 10-minute simmer transformed the beef cylinders into supple, fat-saturated structures that clung tightly to the sweet caramel onion gravy, cascading over a steaming mountain of buttery, milky mashed potatoes. The textural contrast lay between the deeply savory, seared exterior and the tender, rich core infused with caramelized onions. A masterpiece of pure resourcefulness that shattered the high prices of the butcher counter, restoring kitchen dignity to the homemaker. 18. Swedish meatballs. Carrying the unbridled lineage of Nordic immigrant heritage, Swedish meatballs were the ultimate appetizer and treasured dinner, possessing the power to transform a standard pound of ground beef into the solemn, festive atmosphere of a school PTA meeting. The secret lay in folding nutmeg and allspice directly into the matrix of the protein mass, generating a deeply warm, wild herbal aroma. They seared the meatballs to a crisp exterior, constructed a buttery flour roux, and stirred in sour cream off the heat to engineer a smooth, velvety finish while absolutely refusing any dairy separation. The tangy, creamy sauce tightly blanketed the supple meatballs, saturating every strand of the broad, rich, wide egg noodles. The fragrant cloud of toasted nutmeg enveloped the diner's entire palate, shifting an ordinary weeknight dinner into a special, abundantly rich space of proud memory. 19. Beef stuffed shells. Reaching the peak of its glory alongside the booming wave of Italian-American cuisine, the beef-stuffed shells stood as the most visually dramatic baked dish, frequently anchoring Sunday dinners hosted for special guests. They arranged the giant pasta shells, each packed tight with a matrix of ground beef and ricotta cheese over a foundation of jarred marinara sauce, top-dressing the canvas with a heavy rain of mozzarella before baking it for 25 minutes at 375 degrees Fahrenheit. The oven's heat forced the mozzarella to liquefy and fuse into a structural net that locked the entire assembly down. Each individual shell operated as a self-contained, automated portion, sheltering the rich protein and cheese core within to remain succulent, absolutely refusing any dry or parched textures. It created the illusion of hours of painstaking artisanal labor, but in reality, it required a mere 20-minute high-speed tray assembly by the mother. This was a dish that showcased kitchen mastery, sending a clear declaration, "We cherish your presence here." 20. Salisbury steak. Closing out our flavor catalog is the Salisbury steak, an immortal legend of American pop culture emerging from Dr. James Salisbury's Civil War medical theories to prevent intestinal disease before evolving into the very soul of the aluminum TV dinner tray. The blueprint of the scratch-made home version lay in a thick, 1.5-inch oval patty seared over intense heat to lock the protein envelope, then slow-simmered directly inside a dense mahogany-brown mushroom gravy built from the charred fond clinging to the skillet. Submerged in the gravy, the meat cylinder absorbed the entire payload of savory, sweet and pungent notes from Worcestershire sauce, turning supple and melting smoothly when cascaded over a mountain of mashed potatoes. The dish brought an absolute, satisfied silence to the diner's palate, a monumental legacy that swept from suburban pantries and school cafeterias to the iconic aluminum TV dinner tray, stamped permanently into the collective nostalgic history of an entire nation. What seared these 1970s ground beef dinners deep into the blood and marrow of a generation was never merely their flavor, nor the few cents of canned goods required to construct them. They achieved immortality because every single ceramic baking dish solved a raw human equation of survival. How do you insulate the stomachs of a brood of children on a punishingly tight budget? How do you deliver a hot, steaming platter to a mechanic after a grueling day of selling his manual labor on a monotonous job site? And how do you engineer a standard pound of ground beef into a magnificent, crowning shield that soothes the soul, forcing every family member to crave nothing more than to huddle close together around the Formica dinner table? It is precisely this tight-knit of human connection and that shared space of memory that constitutes the greatest secret recipe, one that has been permanently lost, never to be recovered under the flattening hands of sterile modern technology. This week, try searing a beef patty, cracking open a can of condensed cream soup, slowing down your pace to shatter the machinery of work pressure, and return here to leave a comment telling Nostalgia Cookery the story of the loving mother in your lineage. Hit that subscribe button to permanently anchor yourself to this nostalgia, wishing you a peaceful dinner and a hearth that burns forever bright with love.